I'm the marine science educator right here at Loggerhead Marine Life Center. Now, our center is an active, state-of-the-art sea turtle hospital, research, education, and conservation facility. We sit adjacent to one of the most densely populated sea turtle nesting beaches in the entire world. Loggerhead Marine Life Center has unique and distinct expertise in sea turtles and ocean conservation research. We invite you to dive into the depths of ocean conservation with us here today. We do heavily rely on the support of generous donors just like you. If you are able to make a donation, please click on the button below or go to marinelife.org/donate. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So the area that we're in right now is called the hammock. And the hammock is the term that's referring to the shady place, not the comfortable place you might lay in your backyard. There's a whole lot of very lush green growth in this area, which is one of the defining factors of this coastal maritime forest hammock area. As we go a little bit further along the trail in a few minutes, you guys are going to see an example of the coastal sand scrub, which is a lot drier, and as you may be able to tell from the name, is a coastal environment that has soil that's much sandier and is also much drier with less moisture. The moisture in this area is what's able to support the green trees that you see here. One of these trees is the sea grape. It has characteristic round leaves, and there's actually one that you guys may have seen right at the beginning. They dominate this area all along the shoreline, and in some areas you can actually write on them and send them in a mail like a postcard, which is pretty cool. So if we keep going here, we're going to take a look at a really special tree that has kind of a funny name. Has anyone here ever heard of the Gumbo Limbo tree? And Gumbo Limbo is not a food dish like you might think it is. So this tree right here, the tall one, is the Gumbo Limbo tree. And that tree is also affectionately referred to as the tourist tree. Does anybody know why? So the tourist tree comes from the fact that our beloved seasonal visitors, myself included, here to Florida, oftentimes get sunburned, and we have that red peeling skin, just like the bark of this plant. So it looks a bit like this. And you can see it on the tree up in here as well. So let's keep going along our trail here. You can see all sorts of lush growth in this area. It almost looks kind of like a jungle. And we have a really good example of the Gumbo Limbo, or the tourist tree, coming up here on the right, where you guys are going to really be able to see that peeling bark. There's also a huge variety of other plant life back here, including a plant called wild coffee that's growing right here in front of this Gumbo Limbo tree. But don't use the beans from this plant to make coffee. They're actually known to have hallucinogenic properties. So just as with anything that you find along the trails or in your backyard, you should never eat something that you find on the trail unless you know for sure that it is safe. You should also avoid removing things from the park around you, unless it's perhaps a dead leaf or an already fallen stick. So we're heading along the trail towards a transitional area that we call an ecotone. And an ecotone is referring to that transition between two different habitats. So we're going from this tropical hardwood hammock up into an area that we call the coastal sand scrub. And if you're from Florida, this may be something that you're familiar with. But the area in the coastal sand scrub is dominated by plants more like the palmettos and shrubs and dwarf oak trees. So you're really not going to see the very tall sea grapes or the very tall Gumbo Limbo trees in the coastal sand scrub area. Speaking of sea grapes, we do have one of them right here on our left-hand side. You can really see those round leaves. And for anyone tuning in from up north, that characteristic sound of crunching leaves that you hear in the fall, we also get that here. This is one of the few trees that loses its leaves like that, so you can hear the rustling sometimes. So as you come this way, you'll notice that, it's gotten a lot brighter. It's not as shady as the hammock area. You're also going to notice that if you take a look at the soils here, it looks like sand. Now, has anyone ever heard of a dune before? Can anyone tell me what creates a dune? Anybody from anywhere around the United States ever seen a sand dune before? You should definitely come to Florida and check it out if you haven't. But wind is actually what creates sand dunes. So it blows sand or other lightweight sediment up into structures that we refer to as dunes. So this area here, these very sharp looking plants are saw palmettos. So the way that we identify a saw palmetto is if you take a look here, this center point, all the little leaves come out from one center point, like a fan. Later on, we're gonna see a cabbage palmetto, and you're gonna see that that one's almost more like a fern. It has that arched middle rib with the leaves then coming off the sides. So a unique opportunity here, I've only seen this once before. This prickly pear cactus here is actually blooming. And that prickly pear cactus is the favorite snack for a turtle species that we see here that's actually a tortoise. So if you're ever in Florida, you may see what some people call land turtles wandering around near our facility. Those are actually gopher tortoises, and they don't live in the ocean at all, but they love to snack on the pink fruits that grow on that prickly pear cactus. So gopher tortoises are what we call a native species. Has anyone ever heard of a native species before, or a non-native species? Can anyone tell me in Florida or in wherever you're tuning in from what an example of a native or non-native species in your area is? You can type your answers below the video here. The gopher tortoise that I just mentioned is one of our charismatic native species here in Florida, and a non-native species is something like the brown anole, which is a type of small lizard here that actually outcompetes the native green anole. So that's an example of a native and a non-native species. So we can keep moving up here. This sandy scrub area is what would constitute the perfect home for a gopher tortoise. They actually make their burrows in the dune systems, unlike sea turtles who live out in the ocean. On our right-hand side, we're still seeing that hammock area, that shadier area, and on the left is where we're really starting to go into that scrubland. And just like animals can have fun traits, plants can actually have some pretty cool traits too. And one of them that I'm going to show you is going to be the Hercules Club tree. But before I go on to that, I want to show you an example of the cabbage palmetto. So if you take a look here, you can see that rather than coming out from one area, this one has that arched middle rib compared to, again, this guy here that comes out from one central area. So let's go take a look at our Hercules Club tree. Has anybody ever gone to the dentist because of a toothache or something in your mouth that was hurting? I definitely have. But way back when the Native Americans were in this area, we didn't have a dentist's office that we could visit. So what we have instead are different kinds of local plants that can actually be used for different medicines. And the Hercules Club is one of those plants. So it's also called the toothache tree. And the reason for that is if you take the leaves and you chew them, they actually cause a numbing sensation in the mouth. But I do want to say again, please make sure that in your backyard or if you're on the trails, that you don't take leaves or berries or anything like that off of plants and eat them, unless you know a lot about that plant. So again, on the left here, we have more shrub-like plants. We have shorter oak plants. We have palmettos. And in some areas down here, you see a lot of that dead undergrowth. But that's actually a really important habitat to different kinds of animals that live down here. Like, for example, snakes or lizards. They need somewhere to hide. You'll also see an exotic species that grows in here, which is again a non-native species. And you may see anthills all over in here. So be very careful with anthills that you come across in Florida, because they could be home to something like the fire ants, which are not only a kind of insect that can chew on you, but it can also be a threat to our hatchlings. So make sure you keep an eye out for them when you're walking. As we come around the corner here, we're sort of going back down into the hammock area a little bit before we head back up in elevation into that true scrubland area. And it's up on the corner here that we're gonna see an example of that Hercules Club, which in addition to be calling the toothache tree, you're also gonna see that it has a pretty unique kind of bark. When you think of bark, you may think of something that is smooth or maybe even slightly rough that protects the tree. But this Hercules Club tree has actually taken it a step further, and it has spines and thorns that grow on its bark that protect it from grazing. So this plant here, this tree that's growing, is called the Hercules Club, and you can see the spines and the thorns on the branch there. So we're gonna go ahead and head up into our sand scrub area here. You guys can see that we've pretty much lost a lot of the tall trees that we had before. We're in an area now that has a lot of plants like the oak on our right here. And the leaves look quite a bit different too. They're a lot stiffer than the oaks that you may see up north. And that's to help them conserve what? What do you think might be important for a plant in a sandy, dry environment to conserve? Water. One of the things that plants need to survive is water. And in a hot environment like Florida, water can sometimes be hard to come by. So the plants have to adjust and develop ways to get their own water source. So as we head up in elevation, a lot of South Florida is pretty low in elevation, but we're heading up into one of the higher areas in South Florida. And from some of those points, you can actually see the ocean. And again, that ocean and our beach there is one of the reasons that we have that expertise in sea turtles and ocean conservation, because that beach right out over the horizon, right out on the other side of those plants there, is the most densely nested loggerhead sea turtle beach in the whole world. There's a pretty interesting plant up here that I bet you won't be able to name. Has anybody ever seen this before? It really doesn't have any leaves or any flowers, but it's a type of vine. This is called love vine, or some people may call it strangler vine. And you may think that it's doing a lot of damage to the plant, but it's actually a native species, so it is part of this natural environment. However, it is what we call a parasitic plant. Does anybody know what a parasite is? In this case, a parasitic plant is something that is growing on another plant and taking its nutrients. So this plant, instead of getting its own nutrients, is actually taking them from another plant. And that's something that we definitely see in the sand scrub area. If you look out over the sand scrub, that orange vining plant, that is the love vine. And it grows primarily on the oaks and the other shrubs that are growing in this area. If you listen carefully, you may be able to hear the waves crashing out on the shore. This is an area that has a lot of things like maybe black racer snakes or different types of lizards. Sand scrub areas like this have also been known to have bobcats in them. What we're approaching right now is a pavilion at the top of our trail, and from there we may actually be able to see out over the Atlantic Ocean. Directly to our east now, we actually have the Atlantic Ocean. So Loggerhead Marine Life Center is located right on the beach. guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We really hope you enjoyed this free virtual education program. Our free admission center relies on generous supporters just like you to help us provide our sea turtle patients with critical treatments, as well as to monitor one of the world's most densely nested loggerhead beaches and bring this program to you. If you can, please click on the link below or go to marinelife.org/donate to make a tax-deductible donation. And remember, no gift is too small. Thank you again for your support, and we hope to visit with you on campus soon. Don't forget that this weekend at 11 a.m. we will also be offering virtual patient updates right here on our Facebook Live. I think I have some time for questions if you guys want to go ahead and type them in below.
Do the sea grapes actually produce grapes?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sea grapes actually do produce grapes, and those grapes are edible. But remember, don't eat them unless you are for sure that they are an edible fruit.
Why is the Hercules plant called Hercules?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure where the name Hercules Club comes from, but I've heard more often it referred to as the toothache tree, which is again from that numbing sensation that the leaves cause if you chew them.
Approximately how close are we to the ocean right now?
The ocean, if you take a look over my head here, is just across the street. So it's maybe a 5 to 10 minute walk down a trail right across the street.
What animals depend on the hammock ecosystem?
That is a very long list. I don't think I have time to go through the whole list for you guys, but there's a variety of birds as well as insects and small animals. I've seen everything from raccoons to squirrels to spiders, all sorts of different lizards, blue jays, cardinals, you name it.
Can you tell us what kind of invasive species live in the hammock?
Yeah, so there's one in particular called the rosary pea. It has distinct red, little tiny peas, and that one can cause pretty severe allergic reactions if ingested. So that's one that the county actually helps us remove from our trails. We don't have any in the hammock right now because Palm Beach County does such a good job monitoring that.
Why is the coffee tree called the coffee tree?
That's a good question. It produces beans similar to a coffee plant, but it's one of those names where that common name kind of came about and nobody really knows exactly how it got that way.
Do the prickly cactuses hurt the turtles' mouths?
No, they don't. So they actually can bite in between the spines on the cactus, and the fruit doesn't have those stiff spines that the body of the cactus does. So they're able to safely eat them without harm.
Can you remind us why the love vine is called the love vine?
Yeah, so the love vine is called the love vine because it is tied so closely with the plant. So it wraps around it, almost like the two plants are in love, like they're hugging or something like that. So they call it the love vine.
What types of snakes live in the hammock?
The one that I've seen most commonly up here is actually the black racers. And you pretty much only ever see the tail of it because they're one of the fastest snakes. And by the time they hear you coming, they're pretty much scurrying off into the brush.
Are dunes essential to protecting against hurricanes?
Exactly. Dunes are absolutely essential to protecting against hurricanes, as well as protecting the beach ecosystem as a whole. So the roots from the plants that grow in dune systems actually help to hold that sand together, which not only protects the beaches for our use, but more importantly, protects the beaches for our sea turtles to be able to continue nesting on. So it's really important that when you're on the beach, that you aren't climbing in the dunes or removing plants from the dunes.
How do turtles know which plants not to eat because they're poisonous?
So that is something that's very instinctual. Plants oftentimes emit chemicals or different hormones that can indicate whether they're poisonous or not, and animals are able to pick up on those things.
Do you have a favorite plant?
Ooh, do I have a favorite plant? That's hard. I do actually like the wild coffee plant because I really like how the leaves have the deep ridging and it does produce beautiful red fruits.
Could you remind us how tortoises are different from sea turtles?
Yeah, so sea turtles, like their name, they live in the ocean. So they live in the water and only come on land to lay their nests. Tortoises, on the other hand, live on dry land. They don't ever go in the water.
Was this dune naturally created?
So this dune actually used to be overtaken by non-native and invasive species, and the county came in and was able to restore it to what it would have been in its natural state. And now it's actually colonized with native plants and is sustaining itself that way. you don't have any more questions, I wanted to show you guys, included in the lesson plan for this unit, we have our Hammock Hike guide, as well as a BioBlitz activity that you can participate in. You can explore your very own backyard or local park and submit those images to our BioBlitz activity. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.